let's just have a quick kind of flick through of these then. So on the economic side, um, there's what essentially happens is, businesses, yeah. So what we end up with on the sort of general economic side is there can be some kind of like good results that arise from it. Okay, there can be some good results that arise from it. Specifically, reductions in corporate capital spending can partially offset benefits brought about through government borrowing, such as those of economic stimulus. However, this is only likely to happen when the economy is already at its operating capacity. Um, so yeah, in this respect, the government stimulus is more effective when the economy is below capacity, right? So essentially, this is an example of a sort of economic crowding out effect. The idea is, maybe it's best to show this kind of with a diagram, right? The idea is, if you have your sort of long run aggregate demand here, right? Imagine that's your long run aggregate demand. Um, and imagine in the short run, maybe, or, to be honest, Keynesianism demonstrates it the best, right? So in our Keynesian economic function, we have aggregate demand actually looking something like this, right? And your aggregate supply looks something like that. And the idea, sorry, this is your demand, and that's your supply. And the idea is, as you shift your aggregate demand outwards, right? So this is your AS. This is your AD. As you shift your aggregate demand outwards like so, you're greatly kind of boosting. Yeah, you may be boosting your economy, but your aggregate supply is unable to adjust in order to keep up with your aggregate demand. It's not actually possible for your aggregate supply to keep up with your aggregate demand. And so you end up with yeah, you end up with this situation that you're getting kind of like into a price spiral, an upward spiral of your prices, right? So you've got this upward spiral of your prices, on so the aggregate supply is not moving, your aggregate demand is shifting upwards bit by bit, shifting upwards bit by bit. We end up with a slow and steady, or maybe not so slow and steady, um, increase in your pricing. But you also are able to increase your output, which is quite handy. But the point is, as it says here, it becomes less efficient over time, right? It, it's the problem is you start crowding out if your economy is already at capacity, right? You start crowding out if you've already kind of overgrown your economy, you've reached some kind of physical limit to your capital, some sort of physical limit to, your growth potential. And yeah, you end up kind of stuck in this scenario of not being able to proceed any further. Okay. So that's the economic side of crowding out. And as you can see below, it says, if this is the case, however, an economic downswing could occur during the non sort of maxed times. This can reduce the revenue that the government collects through taxes and spur it to borrow even more money. Theoretically, this in turn can lead to a vicious cycle of borrowing and crowding out. And that's actually going to take us, firstly, we're going to jump to this one first, okay, to understand the infrastructure side of things. Now, this is probably one of the most commonly discussed formats of crowding out right here, the infrastructure case, okay? So, in the infrastructure case, um, yeah, this is kind of like the key one here, okay? So, another form of crowding out that can occur because of government-funded infrastructure development projects. Um, these can discourage private enterprise from launching similar projects in the same area of the market because they're now perceived as undesirable, specifically because the big firm has done the biggest project. Or corporate number crunches might indicate that such investments are projected to be unprofitable, right? Um, this often occurs when with bridges and roadways, as government funded development deters companies from building toll roads or other related infrastructure. In other words, the government engages in such an expensive and widespread build, right? Such an expensive and widespread build